Hello, and welcome to Northern Access Television's new magazine program, EtCetera. I'm Dave McLaughlin. Over the coming weeks, we will be bringing you stories that we hope you'll find interesting and varied. Later in today's program, we'll be taking a look at the collection of fine art collector Aubrey Gibson. But first, we find out about the work of the Australian Caption Centre. This is the organisation that's responsible for captioning television programs for deaf and hearing impaired viewers. As you can see, they've captioned the first half of this program in order to demonstrate their work. Miranda Roberts is their facilities manager here in Melbourne.
The Australian Caption Centre is a national not-for-profit organisation. We were established in 1982, originally by government grant. A year after that we became self-sufficient, and now captioning is funded by the networks and commercial sponsorship. What we do is caption television programs for deaf and hearing impaired viewers, and in Australia there are over 1.7 million deaf and hearing impaired people. So we put captions on television programs, TV commercials, community service announcements, videos as well, so that they can actually understand the audio component of a TV program. Captions that we make for deaf people are a bit different to SBS captions. For instance, we like to make everything perfectly clear so that it's very easy to understand. So for instance, we give captions different colours. Each speaker in a scene is allotted their own colour, as we will be in this interview, so that people can always tell who's speaking, even if they're off screen or their face is obscured. We also include things like sound effects. There was a creaking door, and that is authentic. We really do need to oil our door. Phone rings, that kind of thing, dog barks, we do put all those sound effects in. We describe music, anything that really gets the message across to viewers. So that's what the Caption Centre does. We caption television programs.
Who apart from deaf people can benefit from the captions?
Well, besides deaf and hearing impaired people, and remembering hearing impairment is on the increase with an ageing population, other people do use captions. For instance, people learning English. They find that reading English language programs with English language text actually helps them learn the language. We also do some captioning in foreign languages. So, for instance, we might put Asian captions on an English language program. They're often educational videos or health and safety related videos, things like that.
How does it actually work, and what sort of equipment does the viewer need to get the captions? Because you don't normally see them on TV?
That's right. The captions on television are called closed captions. That means that you can only actually see them if you have the right equipment. The equipment that you need is a thing called a decoder, and that's built into the television or VCR. Most major brands do make decoder televisions. However, VCRs are much harder to find. One manufacturer who made them has just stopped, but hopefully someone else will introduce it back into Australia. So television decoders are the main piece of equipment available. The whole system is run through teletext, which is a service available across all the networks, and it gives you all kinds of information from racing results, weather reports, finance reports, to captions, and the captions are accessed through page 801. So that means anyone with a teletext TV is able to see captions on any program that carries them. They simply plug in the number 801 and the captions appear on the screen. Open captions mean that the captions are burnt onto the tape, like the ones you're seeing now. We've open captioned this program so that people know what teletext looks like. But normally if you're watching TV, obviously you don't see these unless you have the appropriate equipment.
What sort of programs are captioned, and how many?
Well, there's a lot of captioned material on Australian television. Currently around 57% of prime time is captioned, and depending on the day, might even be up to 100%. A huge range of programs. We caption things like movies, the major movies on, say, Wednesday and Sunday nights across all the networks. Most of the ABC is captioned, drama series. We do news and current affairs. That includes the ABC News. We have captioners in every state in Australia captioning the ABC News, so everyone can get that. SBS World News is also captioned. Then we do things like sitcoms, including American programs where we import the caption files. Australian programs like Neighbours, Home and Away, Blue Heelers, they're captioned. And TV commercials are also captioned.
How does an ordinary viewer find out if a program is captioned?
They look in a TV guide, and if they see an S next to the name of the program, that means that it's captioned. Also, if you're just watching television and at the start of a program you see a funny S shape in the corner, that also means there are captions. It stands for super text, which are the captions made by the Australian Caption Centre.
You mentioned before videos are captioned. How are those different from TV programs?
Videos are different because, for a start, you don't use the teletext decoder to view the captions. There are two kinds of videos available. One is open captioned. That means, as I mentioned before, the captions are burnt onto the tape, so you can play them in a normal VCR with a normal TV and the captions will be there all the time. You can't turn them on and off. Those videos are available through, for instance, local libraries. It's always worth checking your local library in case they carry them. Or you can buy them through the National Film and Sound Archive. People can ask us for information. We can send out a video catalogue that tells you which videos have got open captions. Closed caption videos mean that they're not visible in a normal piece of equipment. You do need to have a decoder. Unfortunately, it's a different decoder to the one used for teletext. It's called a Line 21 decoder. But if you do have a Line 21 decoder, you can watch all sorts of videos. Most current release videos available through a video shop do have those closed captions on them. So there's a lot out there, but you do need to have a different piece of equipment.
What is the future going to see for captioning, particularly with the advent of digital TV, etc.?
Well, the amount of captioning is definitely going to increase. There's already legislation in place to make captioning compulsory on all primetime news and current affairs by 1st of January 2001. So that is definite, that will happen. As deaf groups get together and mobilise themselves, lobby government, lobby the TV networks, captioning will increase as well. Digital won't affect the accessibility of captions. People will still receive captions, and as I said, the amount of captioning is going to increase.
As we have just heard from Miranda, the captioners of the Australian Caption Centre work on a wide variety of programs. Kirsty Reeve is one who works on the captioning of live as well as pre-recorded shows.
Well, there's a few of us that do both online and offline. Offline is what's being done here, which are pre-recorded shows, things like Neighbours and Sale of the Century. Online is also called real time, which is live programs, which is what I'm going to head off to do very shortly. In Melbourne we do the ABC News.
What sort of differences are there between doing it offline and online?
There's actually quite a few differences. I mean, basically all the colouring, positioning, etc. is the same. The main difference would be that with offline we actually have a word per second standard, number of words per second, which we try not to put more than 3 words per second up on screen, which is the normal reading speed, because otherwise if there's a scene where there's an argument or something, quite often that'll be so fast that if you put everything that was set up on screen, there would just not be enough time to actually read it. Whereas at the news, because especially most of the journalists and presenters are trained to speak at about 3 words per second, we actually caption every word, but we actually cue it to air live. So there's really no way that we know beforehand how long it's going to take, and if they're running behind on a RVO, for instance, and the sound up's in 3 seconds, they might just absolutely scoot through it. But yeah, that's just part of the live captioning.
Now, is it all done off a script, or do you at any stage have to caption while they're actually speaking?
Oh yeah, we mostly we have access to the Basis, which is the ABC's computer system, and we copy, or we basically cut and paste the scripts from Basis over onto our computer, then we will hopefully get the tape version, the cut version of that story before it goes to air, in which case we then go through, make sure there hasn't been any changes in the editing booth, all the words are correct, make sure that they haven't changed grabs at the last minute, and also with the grabs or talent people that they interview during the story, we position the captions on screen so that it doesn't cover any supers which will come up on screen at the time, or their mouth, because a lot of hearing impaired viewers still like to lip read, and we don't like to cover up mouths because obviously they don't have the option there. And sometimes we have to do it live to air. When there's a live cross, there's just no way around it. We just basically type damn fast. Up in Sydney they have steno captioners who are like court reporters that actually the main thing they do up there is 7:30 report, and that actually comes up on screen as word by word. It looks much different, but a lot different actually, but because none of us are actually steno captioners and we don't have the equipment down here or any other state except Sydney for that matter, we just basically summarise what's being said. We use short forms in both online and offline, which for instance, an example is a short form for Australia. We might type in AUS, and then when we hit a punctuation mark or a space, it actually automatically fills in the rest of it. So we just hit AUS space and it comes out as Australia. We try and use them during live crosses, but often we don't actually have a chance to create them beforehand, and quite often you hit the wrong one anyway, and you end up with things like, yes, there was a bushfire today and breaststroke in the middle of it, which has happened. So there's some amusing errors that have gone to air, but it's live captioning, and there's really, the live crosses don't come up often enough to actually warrant steno captioners being used all the time, and I think we're getting pretty good at it. Most of us have been doing it for 2 years now, so we're pretty good at getting the essence of what's being said and putting it up on screen.
I would like to add that if people want to know more about captions, how they work, what equipment they need, which programs are captioned, they can contact us at the Australian Caption Centre. Oh, here's the sound effect. You should be seeing phone rings. You'll notice the different colours, that signifies a sound effect. You get to know different colour schemes that we use to indicate different things. Anyway, sorry, as I was saying, people can contact either our Melbourne office here. We have a TTY, so people, deaf and hearing impaired people with TTYs can call us directly, and the number is 03 9696 1996. And we also have a free call number at our head office in Sydney, and I'll have to look this number up. It's 1800 777 801, and the 801 is to remind you that you access the supertext captions through 801 through the teletext service. So yeah, people can write to us, we'll send them an information kit.
Welcome back to EtCetera. In the 50s and 60s, and up until his death in 1973, Aubrey Gibson was one of the few large private art collectors in Australia. His collection encompassed many Australian artists of his time, as well as a wide range of overseas works, and was widely regarded as one of the finest private post-war collections in Australia. Late in 1998, a number of works from his collection were exhibited for sale at the Melbourne Fine Art Gallery. At the time, I spoke to Aubrey's son John about his father's passion for art. John, I guess the question I want to ask you is, in your experience of your father, what makes a person a collector?
Okay, well, I suppose I can answer that in two ways. One is the short one, which I think you'd say is great love and passion for something, allied with the means to collect, which is probably self-evident. In the historical terms, I can explain that in my father's case, in that he'd gone to university and then went to the art school in 1920, realised that he was a very good caricaturist, but was basically not going to be an artist. For many years, I think he'd maintained this great interest. And then after the war, he had a business, and the business, as I understand, was fairly profitable. It enabled him to acquire at a time when there were a lot of Australian artists, predominantly, they were the larger part of the collection, some of whom were known, some of whom were not, and he always exhibited considerable taste, and the collection itself is a very cosmopolitan, diverse thing, not only Australian artists but from all around the world, from different countries. But and you have to remember that at that time it was not the sort of fashionable thing where, as we all know, multi-millionaires, billionaires end up collecting art, and whereas at that time there may have been a handful of Australians who had private collections which were recognised. So my father then collected various works. The Dabel you see up there, 1933 it was painted, but my father basically acquired paintings from that the 30s, but predominantly painted in the 50s and 60s. Some earlier works, there's a Tom Roberts over there. And when he went on overseas trips, that's him sort of staring at me over the shoulder, so I better get this right. He went on overseas trips quite frequently for business and for pleasure, and he would go to countries like, for example, Central America, where he first went in 1958, and there's another work up there which is really quite a sort of powerful piece, and from Guatemala, and he would buy things that he liked, and I suppose the passion, the means to do it, and also I suppose opportunity, and hopefully the right place at the right time, and if you ally that with taste, which he certainly had, and I think is reflected in a lot of the works you see now.
I'm interested in what actually makes a collection a good collection. What's your opinion of what is a good collection, and why is your father's a good collection?
I think what makes a good collection is that the person who collects should have some taste. And remember, I suppose beauty is in the eye of the beholder in art, and so there'll be works here that some people will not necessarily like and others they'll really be attracted to. But I think a good collection, I mean, there can be collections that sort of focus on one particular period or one particular artist or what have you. I think the great characteristic virtue of this collection was that it was eclectic, and I think it was recognised as such. And in 1969, when the National Gallery of Victoria had an exhibition for 10 weeks of 100 selected works, and there are about 30 of those here, that reflected this eclectic nature of the collection. And I think it was a good collection because there were some very, very important works in it. Nearly everybody in Australia was represented, and there were some overseas works which of artists who may not necessarily be known today but at the time were recognised. So look, all collections have sort of relate to a period. I think another element in answering your question is that while some of these works may have dated in the sense they're no longer popular, that there are enough works here which people come into and say, look, that's fantastic, I want it. And in terms of what Brian Colley has done here, and I say my wife as well, who's been working with him, having picked all these different works out, there are just a large number of them that could have been sold many times over. So it's interesting that here in 1998, for someone who basically ceased collecting nearly 30 years ago, and works which effectively all of which were collected 30 years ago or more, that there are people who can walk in here and say, look, that's something I'm really attracted to, I really want to buy it.
In terms of the international aspect to the exhibition, how you mentioned your father went overseas and would collect works of overseas artists, how do you think that reflected his day and trends in art from then on?
Look, I think that he was quite adventurous, which was fairly, I think, atypical. In fact, probably really quite extraordinary at the time. And one of the examples, of course, is the fact that in the 50s and 60s, he began, having made a number of trips to Japan, he began collecting contemporary Japanese art. And now, I mean, if that wasn't given the historical context. If that wasn't sort of out of left field, I don't know what is. So, but he went to Japan, he made friends there, people in the artistic world. He used to correspond with a professor at Kyoto University called Toro Mori, who was himself an artist, was a very distinguished Japanese academic in the art world. He had an affinity with Japan, and he had an affinity with other cultures as well. But there he was collecting that. I think I mentioned before about Central America. The centrepiece of one of these is this Ecuadorian painting called Rondadores. Well, it's a painting that clearly has got a sort of feel to it and is very striking. He collected works from the Philippines, all the European countries, so France and Italy, particularly France, from Scandinavia, from America. Even one thing I haven't mentioned, which I remember very clearly, went to South Africa for the first time and was invited to Soweto and ended up buying a couple of small sculptures, one of which was I think was a Christ figure, just a small sculpture, and it was just a very beautiful work, which I think he ultimately ended up giving to the National Gallery. But he'd be in a different context, a different cultural context, and he would be attracted to something, and he wouldn't just sort of stop there. He'd go that step further, and he'd buy it.
How do you think your father's passion for art and for collecting affected you and the rest of your family?
I was a bit blasé about it, I think there's a way to say. Sort of as a teenager growing up in a room, this size and larger, full of works of art, as that photograph at the back shows. That was what it was like, and I mean, I knew what I liked. I suppose that's one of the good things about it. I've always had an interest, and we've collected a few smaller things over the years, but I just don't think that I had that sort of passion, and I sort of haven't had the means. I mean, what was imbued, I think, was certainly an appreciation and an interest, and I'm very grateful for that.
How intact has your family been able to keep the collection since your father's death?
Reasonably intact, but for example, when my mother moved from a large house to a flat, and that necessitated being sold. Now she's 91 and she's in a nursing home. That necessitated this particular sale. Various things have been sold over the years, but so the family's kept certain works, and we hopefully will continue to.
Did your father have any strong views on that?
Look, he was a person who, when he collected something, he very, very sort of rarely sold anything except in his last few years. There was no prescription when he died as to keep it together, and in fact one of those things, I suppose, you're not going to live necessarily for something that your father has done, and there's no sanctity attached to the collection. But nonetheless, and that's one of the good things about this exhibition, that essentially it reflects very much the essence of what he was and what the collection was, and people get an understanding of what collecting and what a collection is like. But he never sort of said, like, look, over my dead body, literally.
Do you think your father would probably take the attitude that he had his chance to enjoy this art and now other people should have a chance to buy?
Look, I think he even though it was private collection, the gallery wasn't open publicly, he always encouraged young people, people who wanted to see it would come, people who were researching, people who were visiting the country who were interested in art would come. There's a fellow, Terry Whelan, who's well known as a collector, said to me on the opening night, he said, look, I'll never forget your father when I was 19 doing fine art. He invited me to the house and he sat me down and talked to me about collecting, talked to me about art. And this is Terry, sort of nearly 40 years down the track, says to me that this is something. So, I think that's particularly important. As far as we're concerned, it's a great pleasure. A number of Brian's clients and friends of ours, even other people, have come and have bought things, and it's really lovely to know that certain works are going off to certain houses, and to friends and people who really appreciate and really liked it. It's wonderful that people come, a lot of people have been through here, and they have appreciated what he was and what he did and what he brought together and what he maintained and recognised him as a genuine article, a genuine collector.
And that's all for our program today. Be sure and join us again. Goodbye.